Hey, thanks for checking out my channel. Today's colors that we'll be using on our palette are up on screen, and we'll put them in the notes for this video as well. Appreciate you joining. Today we're going to paint a familiar scene, at least familiar for me and my household here. We're going to paint our dog Holly, who is a mixed breed dog, in a scene like you see here. This is going to be the finished painting. We're going to draw and paint based upon multiple reference materials and sources, many of which I'm putting up on screen. And in addition to that, we're going to use some assistance not only from our own photo collection of Holly throughout the years, but also with the help and guidance of artificial intelligence. This will also be further augmented based upon multiple paintings and sketches like the ones I'm showing now that I've done of Holly throughout the years in oil paints, pastel, watercolor, and many other medium. So when it's all said and done, my goal is to create really a lifelike caricature of Holly enjoying a cup of coffee, engaging in a human activity. While exploring different options for this painting, I played with the idea of including her best friend, this plush toy ducky. And my thought process led me to an image like this one. I thought it might be pretty compelling. I decided to go with reference material created through artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, that looks like that photo that just popped up before. And we are using artificial intelligence as a complement to multiple sources of information. And we are definitely not copying the image. We're going to use it as a way of developing our point of view on this painting and organizing the design of the painting mainly. One of the weird things about artificial intelligence is if you've used it to create an avatar for yourself or for a pet, you may have noticed that the likeness of the image is, for some cases, really dramatically shifted, and there will be characteristics that are just not present in reality. I'm not quite sure why that happens, and it definitely happened with the images that we collected through the use of artificial intelligence here for this project. Today we're painting on a 12 by 12 inch square cradled wood panel that I painted with several coats of black gesso. Now, to start the painting, you'll see I put in selectively a little bit of a wash of a mix of burnt sienna, raw sienna, a little touch of dioxazine purple, and then occasionally some of that lighter colored violet that you see as well. The intention here is just to lay a base for the painting, mainly the background and foreground. And in addition to that, start the process of outlining the main shape for Holly, the dog that's going to be featured in this painting. So far, almost the entire painting that's been done has been the negative space found around Holly. And we're going to go ahead and start laying in some marks that are intended to indicate the initial likeness of Holly. This will be a very rough sketch. Note that I'm using a small flat brush, and on occasion I will switch between and amongst flat brushes and filberts to start this painting out. Very quickly you'll see a likeness of a dog, and over time we will look to refine the likeness so it looks more and more like Holly. Now, as we make our way through this process, we are painting with oil paints. So, as is the case usually when painting in oil paints, which are either opaque or semi-opaque paints in most cases, it's important to start from the dark values and progress toward the lighter values within the scene that you're painting. This is almost always going to be the case with oil painting, whether you're painting an interior scene, a still life, a scene out in nature within the landscape. Same is the case here when we're painting a pet portrait. So the key here, especially for Holly, who happens to be a dog that has unique fur, which is lighter in color in most spots, it's going to be really important to stay disciplined and resist the urge to jump into painting the lighter values in her fur too soon. We're going to want to progress very carefully and slowly toward the end of the painting until we add the final highlights and touches to her fur. And we'll take a similar approach to the highlights in the background, the foreground, and within the coffee mug that we'll add in here in just a moment. So, a couple things I want to share about our dog Holly before we progress here through the painting and the description of what's going on. Holly is what is often referred to as one of the teddy bear breeds. She's a hybrid between a Shih Tzu and a Bichon Frise. She was adopted and she was the runt of her litter. She was the last of her sisters and brothers when we picked her up, and she was the tiniest by far. And she's been a part of our family since the pandemic, and we actually acquired her not too long after we lost our previous dog, Pearl, who was a similar breed. If you're like us, lots of times we attribute, or at least seem to identify, very human traits and characteristics from a behavioral standpoint within our pets. Oftentimes, Holly will want to join us during meals. She'll want to sit and watch football or other sporting events or movies with us. Quite often, it seems like she's engaging in conversations with us when she starts chattering or barking or nudging us to do different things. And then there's often, the typical play, whether it's fetch or catch or what have you. So the idea of incorporating this very human behavior of enjoying a warm cup of coffee is one that appealed to us because we feel like it kind of is a nod toward some of those characteristics that we see in our dog Holly quite often. And it's not an original idea. There are artists all over the place that are painting caricature-like pet portraits similar to this one. So it by no means is an original idea in any sense. This is being done purely for the enjoyment of our family. And perhaps maybe after watching this video, you'll conclude that you can take a similar approach to create a similar art piece for yourself or your family, or maybe some friends of yours if you're interested in doing so. This might give you a little bit of the information that you can use to create this yourself. Now, I've made the conscious decision of utilizing gold and yellow hues alongside of purple or violet hues, mainly because these two complementary colors will oftentimes read well from a distance when placed next to each other. It's just a classic combination that tends to enhance the overall image of a painting when they're included together. And we're going to use it in the background and foreground. You also see some inclusion of those two hues in the depiction of Holly's fur. And we'll make sure that all along the way, we take a very light and gentle approach toward incorporating these two colors, because they can be a little dominating if you're too heavy-handed with them. And we want this to be a relatively soft image that's pleasing to the eye, that's going to fit well within the arrangement that we put into place within our little coffee bar. We don't want it to be a dominant feature, just something that complements the process of brewing coffee and enjoying a cup of coffee, and just gently reminding us of one of the other simple pleasures of life that can go well with sitting and enjoying a cup of coffee, and that's our little dog, Holly. In this imaginary scene, we're going to have multiple sources of light. So there's going to be ambient light coming in from the imaginary background that we're creating. There's also going to be a slightly dominant source of light, which will be coming in and lighting Holly's fur up from the top left of the canvas. From her perspective, it would be the top right. So we're going to try and honor that, the fact that there are multiple light sources that are delivering light into this imaginary scene that are going to be bouncing around, but also the fact that the dominant source of light is going to be coming from the upper left. So we're going to light up Holly's fur and other elements of this painting in a way that honor that suggestion of where the main light source is coming from. And that'll influence where we lay in the shadows. That'll influence how we're going to think about how light is bouncing around. That'll also influence the depiction of her fur, depending upon where we're actually painting it on her body. In some cases, her fur will be less highlighted, more in shadow, warmer or cooler, depending upon the light source. And we're just very gradually making our way through. By the way, I sped up the footage here just so this video could stay approximately 40 minutes in length. The total elapsed time it took to complete this piece was just shy of 1 hour and 45 minutes. And that's mainly because even though it's a smaller scale painting, I really wanted to take my time to gradually build up to the highlights within Holly's fur in the effort to make it look a little bit more realistic, even though this is kind of just a fun little caricature intended to maybe warm the scenario, warm the scene a little bit, maybe make people chuckle from time to time, and just appreciate the cuteness that we see within our spunky little dog, Holly. Now, occasionally, whether it's to deal with maybe a little heavy-handedness that's been applied to applying the paint, indicating some of the medium or highlighted areas on her fur, or the foam, decorative foam, coffee art within the coffee itself, we can always create a little bit of ruggedness or roughness or finer lines and texture within those areas by using the back of the brush handle. And that's what I've done a couple of times here. There were a couple of instances where the paint just went on too thick, and I was able to cut it by using the back of the brush handle. Now I'm liking where this is going. I've spent some time blending the background, and we're going to build in some highlights back there in a few moments. Before I do that, I want to test out some brighter midtones within the fur just to lift up the brightness a little bit on Holly's fur. Also create some indications of where some of the highlighted areas will sit when we get closer to finishing this off. As you can see, I'm using a flat brush here, a small flat brush that has a relatively fine edge to it, and I'm using that to loosely depict her fur. And when we're thinking about how we're going to complete this painting, the background will play a significant role in this. My intention is to create a very blurred out, luminous background. Almost a cinematic feel will be applied to this. The intention is to uh, create an illusion that will push the background of this painting further back, and also an enhanced illusion where Holly, the dog featured in this painting, and her cup of coffee are pulled forward. We want to create that illusion of three-dimensionality, but with that cinematic little feel to it. So we're going to continue to evolve that and continue to work our way up to the brightest highlights on her fur. We're not quite there yet, but you can see some indication of her form, her three-dimensionality, and also the texture within her fur are starting to come to life here at this point, which is kind of exciting. Now I'm very gently using the back corner of that flat brush in areas where I want to indicate some stragglers of hair that are popping out. That's a really important feature for Holly and the texture within her fur. So I'll do this, and then occasionally when there's a brush stroke that doesn't look quite right, I will go back to the back side of the handle of the brush to help make slight corrections where needed. I mentioned earlier that we were working from dark to light, typically the process that we will follow when we're painting in oils. We're also going to be working from warm to cool. So not only do we evolve the painting from dark values to light values, but warm colors to cool colors. And that's why a lot of the fur and other elements of the scene, including those in the background and the foreground here, have included a lot of yellow and red within the paint mixtures. Gradually, we will incorporate cooler colors that will involve more titanium white and more blue. But for now, we're going to slowly build toward that. And you can see we're kind of moving around the whole painting at this point, trying to incorporate different colors and values, modulate from lights and darks, warms to cools throughout the whole painting in hopes that that'll help build greater balance and continuity throughout the painting. And we will work through Holly and the coffee cup as well, with the intention of building out the shapes so it looks a little bit more like the real thing. Remember, this is a puppy portrait caricature scene that we want to look fairly realistic. We want it to look like the actual dog that is part of our family that we know real well. So we're going to be using all those reference materials that we showed earlier to come back to make sure that the likeness is there, at least to the best of my ability. We're going to blur out some of these background elements. Remember, we want it to be cinematic in style, and then we're going to continue to work our way throughout the painting. Now, what I'm realizing now is we're going to be somewhat limited in as far as how far we can go with the texture of her fur in this first setting. What I'm realizing now is that there's a high likelihood we're going to have to let it dry at least for a few hours so the paint starts to tack up a little bit in order to get layers on that will actually be effective in depicting her fur. One of the things with white paint, whether it is titanium white or this warm white that is available through Gamblin, which is the brand of paint I happen to be using with all the pigments that you see here, with the exception of titanium white. That happens to be a store brought, the store brand available through Hobby Lobby. There's no real reason for that, but what I wanted to mention is that those pigments that include titanium white, and definitely is the case for pure titanium white, tends to be one of the slowest drying pigments that we have access to as oil painters. So while some of the other hues will tack up and dry at least a little bit as we make our way through an hour or two of painting, that titanium white oftentimes will take quite a while longer. And sometimes having partial dryness or at least a little bit of tackiness starting to form in a paint will enhance our ability to build additional layers upon that area of the painting. And because there's so much white involved in this, we're definitely likely to have to do this in 2 sittings. And that's okay. You know, my favorite thing in the world to do from a creative standpoint is going out into the field, into nature, and painting on plein air. I would say a close second, I would put dog portraits up there. So I'm okay with having to spend a little extra time on this painting. So just making our way around the painting here, looking to enhance the foam coffee art here. And we'll probably have to take a few stabs at this as we make our way toward finishing the painting. But I like the way it's looking. Using the back of that brush handle again, looking to build in textures and also areas of subtle highlights and midtones. And in addition to that, ensure that the actual structure of the shape really resembles, in a 3-dimensional nature, a coffee mug and the foam sitting on top of the coffee. So that's the intention here. And we'll just make our way around and keep a close eye out for evidence that we might be overworking this area. We don't want to do that, that's for sure. And we'll move on to another section of the painting here in just a moment. Now at this point, I'm really starting to work a little bit more aggressively toward incorporating brighter midtones and highlights to the fur. I'm using primarily as my base the warm white from Gamblin in this instance, which I think provides a nice foundation to mix different tints to enhance the color within Holly's fur. I will use that warm white mixed with titanium white on occasion to cool it off. And then in addition to that, I will use the cadmium yellow medium, yellow ochre, and on occasion other colors, including burnt sienna from time to time, amongst others. And the intention is to build variety, not only in value, but also in hue, to make sure that it's kind of an interesting texture and feature of the painting to look at, while at the same time honoring the fact that at first glance, Holly's fur looks white in just about every area except for some of the tan patches that are featured on her fur. For example, what you see going on with her ears. In those areas, the fur will include other pigments that will tint the warm white that's being used. And for those, I will use some of the red and yellow pigments on my palette. Now, I'm just making my way through, hoping to enhance some of the form by way of the direction of the fur and the placement of the pigment. And on occasion, we'll have a little mistake, much like you see there. I was a little heavy-handed on the right side of her snout. That area is in shadow and shouldn't be quite that light in value, but that's okay. It's just a small area. You'll see we're going to work through kind of modulating that by mixing the pigments so it's a little bit darker. And also we'll resort back to the good old backside handle of the brush to kind of scratch some of that off. And we'll use that little mistake by minimizing the brightness and chunkiness of the marks there to indicate maybe some of the light is coming over and wrapping around her snout and creating some subtler highlights. Really important. And that was a common theme throughout a lot of Bob Ross's videos that I remember watching while growing up. You got to learn to use those mistakes to the benefit of the painting. It's really not worth stressing over them. Just about anything we do in the world of painting can be corrected or repurposed to enhance the painting. So we're going to continue to work this way for quite a while. I'll speed up the film from time to time. And then in a few moments, I'll come back as we put some of the finishing touches on this painting. And we'll talk about a little bit of the thought process involved in deciding where it is we're going to land this painting and decide to stop. And that's really going to boil down to whether or not we think any additional mark making will enhance the painting or not. But we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So now we're getting to the phase of the painting where we're going to wrap it up pretty quickly here. I'm actually in my second sitting and I'm making adjustments to the lightness and looking for opportunities to increase the brightness and lightness of the dog fur here. I need to be careful not to overdo it. I want to make sure that I maintain as much of those dark and neutral areas within the fur's texture as possible, because that's going to create the contrast, which ultimately will drive the illusion of her furry texture. Also, while I'm making my way through the rest of the painting process here, I'm going to start looking for opportunities to create indications of different light sources bouncing throughout the image. You can see I'll put a little bit of the red and the purple and violet in there from time to time. I'll also tint the white and the warm white pigment that I have on my palette to include those colors as well. The intention here is really twofold. One, I want to honor what is actually going to happen in a scene like this. If I was painting from direct observation, I would actually see evidence of the different colors of light bouncing off of the lighter areas, in particular, the countertop in front of Holly and also within the lighter portions of her fur. The second thing that I look to achieve by kind of pursuing that quality of light is to make the painting more interesting. Just give the viewer a little bit more to look at, make it a little bit more pleasing to the eye to see different colors within and throughout the painting, as opposed to just big blocks of color. This scene could easily be achieved in that manner by using broad brush strokes, almost like you would if you were painting in pastel and using the broad side of the pastel stick. But with oil paints, one of the advantages of using this media is to vary the approach toward creating different textures and the treatment of light. So we're going to look to take advantage of that here. Same goes for the coffee mug, which is white, but as you probably have noticed, if you look closely, the coffee mug itself does not include any pure white. In some areas, it's almost pure warm white, but throughout most of the shapes used to build this coffee mug, you're going to see evidence of gold, yellow, some purple, and also some of the burnt sienna and other hues within the mixtures used to paint those shapes that comprise the coffee mug. So we have maybe a little bit more than 5 minutes to go. If you're still with us, if you've enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, insightful, please consider subscribing and liking this video, perhaps maybe even share it with a friend. And if you happen to think that this is something that you would like to see more of on the channel, let me know that too. You could put that in the comments. I'd also be happy to take any request for commissions for this sort of painting as well. As mentioned, this is one of my most favorite sorts of art to create. Maybe a close second to plein air painting on site out in the wilderness. I don't want to forget to say thank you. Thanks for checking out my channel. Thanks for checking out this content, this video. It's very appreciated. It does a number of things for us artists when you look at our video content. One, it helps us feel as though we're being useful because we're sharing insights into our process and maybe helping other creatives make their way through their efforts to build their own creative practice. In addition to that, it's a great learning tool for me, the artist, because I get to see with each of these paintings that I film the process for, where I may be able to do better with future paintings. I'm going to try from here on out to build some three-dimensional elements within certain aspects of the painting, like the foam that's making up this coffee art. And I'll do that by using thick impasto strokes of paint. I'll try to vary the color so it doesn't look too chunky or blocky and it looks a little bit more realistic. And we want to make it seem as if that is popping off of the canvas like it would in real life, with the puffs of bubbly foam on top of the hot coffee. And you can see Holly there in the background staring us down. This is pretty similar to how she might look at us if she was asking for some food. So I'm pretty happy that I'm getting that sense because it makes me feel as though I did at least an adequate job of capturing her likeness using all of the reference materials that I've showed you along the way. So we're going to close this out here with a few final passages, looking to build those final highlights into the coffee foam, the coffee mug, occasionally in the foreground, the background, and in Holly's fur. Once again, I want to thank you for checking out this video, and consider checking out a couple of the playlists on my channel. including pet portraits. That's one that you might enjoy if you've enjoyed this video. And there's several others, including my hike and paint playlist, which will feature videos where I will take you along with me on a brief hike off into the woods, most often somewhere out here in the Pocono Mountains where we live. And then I'll paint for a while and you'll get to see how that process unfolds. So thanks again. Stay well. Hope to see you again next time.